Today we're going to go through a typical day of making sourdough bagels, my favorite sourdough bagels. And we're also going to make some pregnancy tea called Nora tea. And this is just as we go throughout our day, this is something you can pretty easily fit in amidst the chaos. And one thing I feel like a lot of social media accounts or different homemaking accounts can kind of allude to is that, homemaking is just baking and cooking and just loving on babies. And it is all of those things. And those things are so wonderful. But if I had to pick one task that I do more than anything while homemaking, I think it would be dishes. And this morning was just one of those mornings that started with a sink full of chaos and a kitchen full of chaos. And I spent the whole first hour of my day just getting my kitchen to where it was even usable. So if you have those days where you feel like you're the only one who, can't stay caught up and seems to always be behind on the cleaning and the laundry and all the things, just know that everybody else is in that exact same boat, unless they have somebody else that's doing it all for them. And I know some people do, and that's wonderful. But I feel like the average, mom or working mom, homemaker, stay-at-home mom, any of the above, we are all spending just so much of our time doing the basics. And, I've had to really learn how to love doing those tasks and find appreciation in them, because if you don't, they'll drive you kind of nutty. One thing that makes my day so much better is tea. So like I said earlier, we're going to talk about a pregnancy tea that I am making today that I'll be blending up. Tea is just one of those things that it's, kind of like me time throughout the day. And I highly encourage finding things that bring you joy and that bring you peace and make time for them. And they can be a simple little thing like just making a tea that's just for you. Especially during pregnancy, there's a lot of things that we kind of cut back on when we're pregnant, but there's a lot of things we can still indulge in. So I'll get back to the tea. I'm going to walk you through the process that I use to make sourdough bagels. And there's a million recipes, and you can find all types of different varieties and ways to do it. But one thing I'm really focusing on this year is creating my own, recipe book of all the staple recipes. All the things that I need on a weekly basis, I want to be able to just lean into that recipe book that I have set aside, pull it out, and be able to whip these together and not have to think twice about it. And a lot of times I feel like we get so caught up in feeling like we always need new recipes and we have to try new things. And new things are so wonderful. I try at least something new every week, if I can. But the more we kind of lean into having things in our routine, it has made homemaking so much easier for me. I have made these bagels no less than 12 times already, probably. So also take that into account. If you try this and they don't turn out perfect round one. Mine didn't turn out perfect round one either. So then I tried again, and then I tried again. And you kind of learn through the troubleshooting. But my goal with this video is I'm going to talk you through a lot of the troubleshooting I already did. And my goal is that, it helps you avoid that so that you can just make them and they turn out so perfect the very first time you do. So I'll post all the details. I might even have them pop up on the video itself of the ingredients that I'm adding. But one thing I really like about this recipe is it's only 5 ingredients. It's literally water, salt, honey, flour, and sourdough, or your sourdough starter. For me particularly, you'll see me adding 2 different jars. That's because I don't make a really big batch of sourdough every day. I work, I have a toddler, I don't do as much cooking as I would love to when it comes to sourdough baking, so I try not to waste it, and I make smaller batches. So one thing that I found that helps me a ton with this bagel recipe is I save my sourdough discard, and I also add that. See, there's the active one. But I also save my discard and add that as well, so that it gives me just a little bit more to get the full amount that I need for this recipe without me having to make a whole lot more. It's just me using what I already had. And I really enjoy doing that. But for this recipe, I'm starting in the morning because you want to make the dough first, and then you let the dough sit for at least 8 hours. And you're just having it sit on your countertop at regular room temperature, and you're letting it kind of rise and ferment for at least an 8-hour period. Now, I'll post the original recipe that I got this from in the description. And in her recipe, she says to let it ferment for anywhere from 8 to 24 hours. And I did the 24 hours one time, and they just did not work out for me. And it might have just been my attempt. You know what I mean? It might have just been my troubleshooting. But I did not thrive with leaving it out for that amount of time. So like I said, I'm going to have the original recipe, her blog post. I've made a few amendments to it of the way that I do it, but I always want you guys to have access to where I found this in the first place. I didn't make this recipe up myself. But I find that it works really great if I let it sit on the counter for like an 8 to 12 hour period. So I'll either make it first thing in the morning so that I can actually cook the bagels around dinner time, or I will make the dough right before I go to bed and then let it rise overnight, and then I make the bagels first thing in the morning. So you can kind of cater that to how you expect your day is going to go. For this particular day, I knew that we would be home at dinner time, so it worked out for me to make them first thing in the morning, and then later on tonight, you guys will see in the video that I actually pull them together and make them. Another thing that I amend from her original recipe is I only use 3 cups of flour, and hers kind of wavered from that. I also hand mix, so you'll see me just using a spatula. I love this spatula. It's like my favorite bagel making spatula. And then I also kind of hand knead it for a little while. I don't do it super long. I only knead it for, maybe 5 minutes, probably less. I just look for it to be really nicely blended up, and I kind of keep mixing it until it starts to become a little bit sticky. So you can see while I'm doing it right there that I'm able to knead it around and move it, and it's not sticking to me. So I keep kind of pushing it the way that I am and still until it starts to pull apart a little bit, and then I leave it alone. As the bread rises, as your dough starts to rise, it's going to fill your bowl out. One way to keep it from sticking to the sides is you can oil the sides of the bowl, and that's all I'm doing right there. And that's just so it pulls out easier. You can put it in a nice, brand new, clean, oiled bowl, but as you saw at the beginning of this video, I have so many dishes already. So I'm just reusing, the exact same bowl it's already in, and I'm just kind of putting that oil over the little bits of flour that are around the sides, and it's perfectly fine. Once you have it looking beautiful like that, just cover it, and then you can see it covered with a towel. I do like a saran wrap over it to airtight it, and then I put a towel on it too, just for some extra pressure to hold it in place. So here I'm making my tea, and this is the tea that I've been using for quite a few weeks in pregnancy. But one thing that I've talked about quite a bit with my midwife is that the tea that I'm currently making, I'm using a lot of like pre-packaged tea bags. And for one, it kind of adds up when you purchase them that way. You have to really buy a lot because a lot of herbal teas, the big point of it is to do them consistently. Oh, this I was just showing you that I did manage to fit breakfast in there. The days that I'm working and cooking and trying to do things, I keep breakfast super simple. So bacon and eggs it was, and everybody was happy. But one thing that we're really switching is I am moving to more intense teas. I want it to have more oomph to it. And in order to do that and not break the budget, it's best if you order in bulk. So this is just me showing you guys, I have liked an herbal company for years now. I don't have like an affiliation with them or anything. This is just me showing you how their products come. But I order from Mountain Rose Herbs, and I'll put a link to their main website down in the description. I've ordered their spices, I've ordered their baking goods, I've ordered their teas. I love so many products that they have. The biggest thing is you just want to order what you think you will use probably within the year. You don't want things to, sit in your cabinets for forever. For this specific situation, I ordered a full pound of everything that I need for the Nora tea that I'm making. The only one not pictured is nettles, because I've already ordered nettles in bulk, and I've been drinking that one pretty thoroughly since day one of pregnancy, whereas a lot of these other ones I'm just now adding as we're kind of partway through second trimester. So I'm going to put a link in the description. Like I said, a lot of this stuff is going to be in the description for you guys so that you can look it up for yourself as well. But I found a really good blog post written by a midwife talking about what Nora tea is, talking about each of the individual herbs and a lot of their benefits and the reasons why they can be great during pregnancy. But as with all things, you want to work with your provider on this, talk to them about it. This isn't me telling you what to do. This is just what I am personally doing. And I've been very open with my midwife that this is, what I'm working on right now. And she was all about it. So always talk to your provider, whoever that may be, or if you are your own provider. I've talked in my video about great pregnancy books. One of them was about learning how to free birth. So depending on where you are in your birth journey or birth confidence or birth experience, any of the above, just, kind of always read. I think it's so important for us to educate ourselves on what we're doing and why we're doing it and the purpose behind it. But for this one, I did basically what that blog post talks about, of doing one part of each of the 4 herbs, just do equal amounts. So for this, I did just 2 cups of each of them, and then I mixed it together to where it was blended really nicely, and then moved it into pint jars. And by doing 2 cups of each, I think the only one I didn't do 2 full cups of was the oat straw. I only did 1 cup just because that's a newer herb for me. And anytime I'm starting an herb I haven't done before, I always do a little bit less first and just see how my body responds to it. And then I up it from there. Less is always better in the beginning. But by doing 2 cups of each herb, I was able to fill 3 pint jars. And I kind of pushed it down in there pretty well so that it would fit nicely. But just to give you an idea of how much you're blending up, like I said, that made 3 pint jars for me. And then it had a little bit of extra, and I just used that extra to make my tea last night. But these are my Nora teas, and I'll just be keeping them in the cabinet where all of my teas and spices and everything stay. And then I have the extra bulk, there's still a ton of it, up in my cabinet just away from sunlight, and it's at a really good temperature so that those store really nicely. But I will go through these 3 pint jars and then continue to make it, and I'm going to continue to drink this tea in postpartum as well, which is why I ordered it in bulk. But I also have a ton of friends that are having babies right now, and I was thinking about making, some little pint jars to give to them as well. So it can be a great thing to gift to people. As with all things, just tell them what it is and give them some resources so that they can read into it themselves as well. Okay, back to bagels. So this is around dinner time. So around 5-ish, whereas I made the dough around, I want to say like 9 a.m. by the time I finished cleaning the kitchen. So it's been setting for, I think I waited a good 8.5 hours and then pulled it out. So I'm pulling it out of the container and it comes out really easily. I just use that spatula, the one that I love so much, just to get it to pull completely cleanly out. But when you oil it, like I showed you earlier, it almost just falls out of the container, which is really nice. Now, when I pull it out, personally, I don't do anything with the dough other than add a tiny bit of flour like you saw. But I'm not kneading it more. I'm not doing anything other than laying it on a floured surface. And then I cut it into 8 equal pieces. So this is just me, and it cuts really easily. You're not like having to cut into it. You're just literally pushing down in. I don't have a dough cutter, so I just use a knife, and I find it works perfectly fine. But I cut it into 8 little, it almost looks like little pie slices. And then this will create your 8 individual bagels. Now, to make the bagels themselves, you'll see in a minute, I just kind of lightly put it into a ball, and then I just kind of roll it back and forth between my hands. I'm not doing anything too intense with the dough. I'm really not trying to mess with it a whole lot. I'm just trying to make a nice ball, and then just using your thumbs, you're just going to easily pull it apart and create that bagel shape, just like that. And if it's super sticky when you're pulling it apart, sometimes I'll just put a teeny bit of flour on that inside part, just line it with a little bit of flour just so it's not really sticky. But otherwise, this step is super simple. You're literally just cutting it into those 8 pieces, gently rolling it around. I find this very entertaining. This is fun for me. So I make these bagels every week. I don't find them to be a lot of work. But shaping it again, and I'm going to kind of fast forward through this because I think you guys are getting the gist of it. But we're going to shape out our 8 bagels, and then I'm going to cover them with a towel and leave it for anywhere from 1 to 2 hours. So again, you've got to make this work in your time, time it out. We're going 8 hours of the dough sitting on the counter, and then 1 to 2 hours of the dough rising in that bagel shape before we get to this step where I am boiling the bagels in a big pot of water where I have added 2 tablespoons of baking soda. Now, this was part of the blog post that I'm going to pin down in the description from the original recipe. She mentioned adding baking soda to the water while you boil them, and that she found it had a really great reaction with the sourdough itself. And I don't understand any of it, but I love it because it is so much fun to boil something in baking soda. I feel like I'm in science class, The one thing is you do kind of want to stay near the pot because it can really start to bubble up. And I find that when it starts to really bubble up and rise, if I take my spatula and just kind of push the bagels down into the water a little bit, then it'll calm it down. So you'll see me kind of push them down every now and then. But the boiling step is super easy. You're just boiling each of them for 2 minutes on each side. So each individual bagel is actually getting boiled for 4 minutes total. Now, while these are boiling, I have my oven preheating to 425. So as I start boiling them, that's when I pop my oven on to get it to preheat. Now, the one thing that I am particular about is I always make sure that when I transfer the boiled bagel to the drying rack, that I want the side that rose on the counter, like the side that was up while they were shaping, I want that side up on the drying rack as well. And if you do that, then your bagels will turn out really pretty. So if you want pretty bagels also, then just make sure that when you transfer them from the boiling pot to the drying rack, that you are putting that, slightly prettier side on the upside. And that's just such a tiny detail. But, when you put in work of making your own bagels, you want them to turn out freaking cute. At least I do. But, so here in a second, I'm going to show you what they look like just after they rose. That's kind of, they puffed up a good little bit. But that's me putting the last two in there. So I boil 3, 3, and 2. And it doesn't take that much time. After they dry a little bit on the drying rack, I transfer them to parchment paper and throw them in the oven on 425 for 20 minutes. So you can see me coming back. I showered while they were baking, turned into my space pajamas. But this was the bagels after they were done, and they turned out so good, guys. And I know this seems like a lot. You're doing it all day, but these are so worth it. Like I said, I make them every single week. So if you guys are looking for more content like this, I like to post just recipes that I find or birth stories or what I'm doing with pregnancy. If that is up your alley, then I hope you stick around.